Hello and welcome everyone to the Brian Grant Foundation Wellness Webcast. Today's special event, Women and Parkinson's, is sponsored by Amneal. We have a jam-packed episode today, so I'm going to do my best to keep us on track and on time, but I'd like to invite you to put your questions in the chat box below, and we're going to do our best to get to them. Parkinson's is a challenging disease. Being a woman with Parkinson's is even more so. There are many gaps in our medical knowledge when it comes to women and PD. And as a result, we have many unmet needs. With the lack of information and resources, many turn to platforms like this and social media groups to share our collective experiences, to confirm that we're not alone with our physical, emotional, mental, and psychosocial needs. Today, I'm welcoming two panelists to share their knowledge and experiences. Maria de León, Parkinson's Diva, was a practicing movement disorder specialist when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. She is going to share her experience as a specialist and a patient. Sree Sripathy, a writer and photographer, is a co-founder of the Women's Parkinson's Project. They aim to bring awareness, representation, and to raise the voices of women with PD. Maria and Sree, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
As
for
I
having
mentioned, we
us
have
here.
there's so many topics to cover because there's just so many facets that women with Parkinson's experience. So let's start off with the challenges in receiving a diagnosis. We know that women, there's a delay in getting seen and an accurate diagnosis and getting a referral to a movement disorder specialist. Why is this?
Well, do you want me to start or
Yeah, why
Sree?
don't you start, Maria?
Thank you, Amy, and it's great to be here. Well, I think there are many factors for this. One is that we're seeing a greater number of women, especially young women, present with Parkinson's symptoms. And still, most doctors in their training still believe or are taught that Parkinson's is an older male disease. So one is an older person disease, and two is a male predominant disease. So when you are confronted with a young person who is a woman, that's not the first thing that comes in the differential, although that's slowly changing. The other thing is that women may present with a lot more what we call negative, which I don't like that, or non-motor symptoms, which are more depression, anxiety, fatigue, pain, which again, until very recently, that was not something that was well known to be part of Parkinson's. It was not something that was a presenting symptom for sure, and certainly was not even later stages to have visual problems or fatigue or that sort of thing. So, it throws the diagnosis as to what else. So you have other diseases like lupus and multiple sclerosis and other things, fibromyalgia, they're more common to have those symptoms. And two or three, I don't know how many other, women are busy with their, taking care of kids, taking care of family. They're usually the caregiver. So it's hard to get to the doctor and make time to go to specialists. So oftentimes they go to their primary care doctors who may not know about this disease.
Sree, would you like to share your experience of your diagnosis?
I think my experience is atypical. I think one of the reasons women have problems getting diagnosed is we are not listened to when we go to the doctor, and it's hard to advocate for yourself when you are with the doctor and he or she is saying something to you and you're like, okay, you're the doctor, you've had all these years of medical school training, what do I know? But the thing is, women know their bodies pretty well. And so one of the things I started doing was advocating for myself, particularly after an incident, non-Parkinson's related, where I went to a specialist and she refused to give me the blood test that another specialist had suggested. And she was a female doctor. And I had to insist 3 to 4 times that I need these blood tests done. And I was really surprised that I had to insist so many times. I'm thinking the referral is coming from Dr. A and Dr. B is not listening to me. And I would think, maybe woman to woman, she might have understood, but no, in that moment, she's a doctor and she felt I didn't need those tests. But I had to really push for that. And so when I started experiencing symptoms of Parkinson's disease, one thing I did is I made sure I had built up a good relationship with my primary care physician, which is not easy to do. So when I first met my primary care physician, it was a very cold, kind of stiff relationship. But over the years, we've gotten to know each other. I know about her family. She knows a bit about mine. We'd exchange a little bit of small talk. The meeting, it's only 15 minutes, so I do whatever I can in 15 minutes. But then it got to the point where, like, when I would leave the office, she'd give me a hug, or she'd check in on my other emails to the doctor. So when I presented, I think there's something wrong with my arm. It's not moving. She sent me to a neurologist, and that neurologist came back and said, we think it's carpal tunnel. And this is me dumbing it down, basically. There's a lot more to that. But I looked at the test results for carpal tunnel, and I said, okay, the carpal tunnel might explain two fingers, but my other two fingers are still having issues. And this diagnosis doesn't consider that. So she heard what I said and immediately referred me to another neurologist, and that was the neurologist who diagnosed me with Parkinson's.
And I think a lot of it too is you just get tired of being told it's nothing, and you burn out. So you just don't continue to see anybody or seek more answers. And you just downplay what you're going through because you're just, like you said, you're busy, you're overwhelmed, and you can't keep pursuing this. So for somebody going through this diagnostic process, what should we be doing and being prepared for? How should we go to these appointments and raising our voices saying, listen to us?
I'll just jump in before Maria goes. So, because mine will be much more short. I think for me, what I do is I email my doctor in advance and I tell her, these are the things that I want to discuss. And then I'll have it printed out in front of me or on my phone where it's easily accessible. And we'll go through all of these things. So she already knows what I have issues with and concerns with, or he already knows, whichever one I go to. And they're willing and ready to answer those questions. So it's nothing like that's coming out of the blue. So I'm prepared when I go, and we go through everything one by one, and then all my questions are answered. And then I'll send a follow-up email if I have any additional questions. Not every doctor or encounter is like that, but I would say go with questions in advance. If you can send them to your doctor, that's great, but have it listed out and don't deviate from what you want to talk about. Stay on the topic because the topic is your health and your life, and you want to get everything understood. And if you don't understand or if things are confusing to you, bring a friend with you if you can. Bring a family member. Bring somebody with you. I did that at a couple of appointments, and that worked really well because my friend took all the notes for me, and I just could sit and interact with the doctor.
Yeah, I think when you're in that moment, some of it can just be overwhelming, and you don't process it in that session, and it's not until later that you think, I wish I had asked this. Maria, what would you recommend for us to be prepared going through this diagnostic process, and what questions to ask and what to do?
Well, I think it really depends what stage you're in. Is this your first time you're presenting with some symptoms and you're not really sure what to do or who to go to? First, I think you need to start with your primary care doctor because, all these symptoms could be symptoms of many diseases. It's not, specific per se of Parkinson. It's a constellation. But I think that if you have family history of Parkinson's, you have family history of essential tremors, you have family history of constipation, chronic depression, you have head injuries, you have migraines with aura, and you have some of these symptoms, then you're more likely to start seeking a referral from a specialist, to see a neurologist, to see what is going on. Otherwise, you start with the basic, and then if they're not sure what it is, then refer you to the next step. Once you get a diagnosis, or you get referral to a specialist, I think that you should always come, as Sree said, always better to have a second person just in case. Two heads are better than one when listening and hearing all that is said. Also, be prepared to have a chronological history, how things happen, how they transpire. The more they understand, the better it is. but don't come with a whole lot of questions initially, but just more of a history of what's going on. So, and also if you've had any tests or anything done, bring it all so they can review things. And also be prepared, because honestly, when you go to most neurologists who are in a university setting, will want to repeat a lot of those tests. So don't get upset. They say, oh, I know you had an MRI, I know you had this, but we're gonna do it. And most likely they will. And they may even want to keep you in the hospital if you're far away. So once that diagnosis is confirmed, then you can talk about what are the treatments, what are the expectations, how to take the treatments, and also when can you call back, who can you call in case anything happens, because oftentimes we leave with the medications and then we don't have an appointment for 3 to 6 months down the road, and then you're stuck at home with side effects or symptoms and you're not sure what to do. So you need to know and be aware of what to expect and who and how to reach them. And if you can always get samples, is the best thing, because these medications are extremely expensive. And so you don't want to go spend or waste your time trying to get insurance to cover something and then find out that you didn't tolerate it. So that's kind of what I would suggest initially, find out what it is.
So all three of us are pretty active in our Parkinson's women's communities. What are some commonalities you hear from your gal pals about their diagnostic experience?
Well, I think that one of the commonalities is that, especially again with young onset Parkinson's for women, particularly, that it is a long process to get diagnosed, usually about 3 to 5 years. It took me 3 years, even though I'm a specialist. And, that was my bread and butter, and still took me 3 years to get official diagnosis. So again, because you're young, you don't expect, certain things like fatigue and pain and visual problems and so on. So they're more likely to think of other things. And that's something that I want to explain to my fellow gals out there, that not to be discouraged. Yes, we don't want it to wait 5 years. However, in medicine, I've discovered, being a doctor and being a patient, that as doctors, we take our time to process everything. Okay, as patients, we are not very patient. We want to have the diagnosis yesterday. So when they tell you, go get a test done and we'll see you in 2 weeks and come back, and you're there fretting and biting your nails, it's horrible. But for a doctor, 2 weeks is like, oh, don't worry, you're gonna have a disease, it's like, we're gonna be okay. So you have to learn, that you have to do, unfortunately, step by step, but make sure that you're making progress in the right direction. That don't go, a lot of times we get frustrated and we go to one doctor and we don't get the answer. So we go to another doctor, we don't get the answer, we go to another doctor. And really, in reality, we're spending a lot more time and wasting time because they never get to know us. And we're just going back and forth. And so we're kind of doing ourselves a disservice, and we're not getting the information that we need. So stick to one person. As long as they're able to listen and hear what you're saying and try to get you to the right diagnosis, and they're working with you, then stick with that person to get you to where you need to be. Okay. If they just say totally blow you up, then yes, go find another person. But it's going to take some time, unless you're so obvious that as soon as you walk the door, they say, yeah, you got Parkinson's. But for most women, a young onset, that's very rare. Okay. For older women, that could be common, and for men, so be patient and learn that it does take a process. And yes, it is frustrating as heck. And as long as they're not telling you you're crazy, or, you need a psychiatrist, or, it's in your head, or, there's nothing wrong with you, then, try to figure out and listen to yourself. Yourself, as Sree said, and Amy says, what you've changed, what your baseline is. So if something's wrong, try to find out. So that's my 2 cents.
Sree, did you want to add anything about the commonalities you hear within your groups?
Yeah, so one of the main things I hear is that even after diagnosis, doctors, neurologists don't listen to women with Parkinson's disease. So several women have reported hip pain, for example, the right or left hip is not working as it used to, and the doctor will come back and say, oh, that's nothing to do with Parkinson's. Maybe it isn't, but to immediately dismiss that, I don't think that's appropriate. And when several women I've talked to, several women have said, we never had hip problems before Parkinson's. We've only found it after we were diagnosed. Once again, it could be something else, but the doctor not listening is a huge impediment as to finding out what that is. So once again, women need to advocate for themselves constantly. And it's very tiring to advocate for yourself when you are going through the symptoms and the side effects of having Parkinson's disease. So it's like you have to care for yourself as a basic human being, and then care for yourself as a person with Parkinson's disease. You're almost like two different people. You know, I've always wanted a twin, but I didn't want this twin. This is not what I was looking for.
Yeah.
The other thing I hear from a lot of women is the lack of research, and you might get into this later, about hormones and women with Parkinson's disease. And I knew nothing about that when I was diagnosed. I didn't know anything about it 4 to 5 years after I was diagnosed, because it never was an issue initially. It became an issue maybe 4 or 5 years into the disease. I've had the disease now. I was diagnosed in 2015 when I was 40. So 9 to 10 years. But I just noticed I was getting very fatigued, and I would wipe out during those months, not months, weeks, not weeks. Oh my God, my brain. Days. And so finally I went to my doctor about it, and she didn't know much about it because, once again, there's very little research on it. So we had to figure something out on our own. So the fact that hormones and Parkinson's disease are linked together for women is something that we need a lot more work on.
Yeah. Well, no, we are going to get to that subject. I also want to add that, you know, for me too, when I go see other non-neurologist doctors, I always preface it with, look, at 34, I was diagnosed with this disease. So I am the, 4 to 5% of this. So please take me seriously. I may be a little bit of a hypochondriac, but you have to understand, like, I got this so young. So why, in my head, I'm like, I could also get, breast cancer, colon cancer at a young age. So please take my complaint seriously, because I've already been through something like this. All right, so we are going to move on to the lower rates of referral and uptake in specialty care. So in addition to women having a delayed diagnosis, they're also less likely to get referrals and receive specialty care like DBS. In fact, women make up less than 25% of the population referred for deep brain stimulus. What does this mean, and why do you think this is? Maria, let's start with you, and with your medical background. Why do you think this is?
Well, it's funny because, throughout my trajectory, I really hadn't thought much about that. And even when I wrote my Parkinson's Diva, I saw those numbers, and at first I was, kind of appalled that, my goodness, well, one has been around for 20 plus years, and we still don't use DBS very much. I know it's very, very slightly used, although it's getting some better. But in reality, I think there's a lot more factors going into that number. Thinking about it, personally, I have been offered DBS many times. And as a doctor, I think DBS, it is a great treatment. It would be a great solution. But I think that my story it resonates with a lot of women because women tend to be, again, the caregiver. They tend to be the one not just taking care of, kids, but then maybe taking care of parents, maybe taking care of in-laws. And so when somebody says, we want you to come and do DBS, you have to take into account, the downtime and the back and forth. And I know as a doctor that, it takes a good 6 to 8 months, sometimes a year, to get you, stabilized on DBS. And so, for me, it's like I could not afford at any of these times that I've been dealing with Parkinson's to be down for that long and have somebody, chauffeur me around. My husband is the breadwinner, and he can't take off work, every month or every few weeks to go, and be adjusted. I think that may change One, because now we have different means of doing DBS, and we can do telemedicine DBS. And so I think that that's one huge benefit that I think that would allow for that transportation that really secludes women from doing it. But also, again, remember, women have a lot of pain. And so wearing those halos, and I'll put those halos in a lot of people, they're heavy metal things, and you're off your medicine. If you ever been off your medication, you know how god awful it is. I cannot stand being off my medicine because one of my first symptoms was pain. And when I'm off my medicine, pain comes excruciating back. I cannot be off my medications, 12 hours, 24 hours, and much less go through surgery on that, and recuperating. So those are issues that I think that women, talk about with their doctors, but they don't reflect on the number who actually gets accepted or who actually ends up doing it. So I think that, sorry, I get really dry, that we need to do more studies and really look at the reasons and why. But I've talked to so many women around the world, and that's one of the biggest thing, that women are not, one, they have a lot of pain, one, they don't have somebody else to take care of them, take care of the family. So right there, and two or three, depending where you are, the financial, it is a huge financial. And if you're the sole breadwinner, again, you're going to be exposing yourself to be out for that length of time. And is your insurance or time going to be able to provide and and be able to support you during that time? So I think there's several factors for that. So anyway.
Sree, would you like to add anything about your experience or decision-making process?
I don't have much to add to what Maria said. She said everything that is possible to be said about this. I will say it would be great to get a study or a couple studies done on the ratio of women referred versus men referred. I've seen one of them or seen a paper on it. I haven't seen that many papers on it. But like what Maria said, there are many factors, right? Women are generally the nurturers and the caretakers, not to make this into a binary, but there are plenty of studies that show that women are the primary caretakers and caregivers. For whatever reason, that's how it is. So when you think about having to step away from that, who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to cook for mom and dad? Who's going to take care of grandma and grandpa? Who's going to organize the Girl Scout committee? Whatever it is, women are often in charge of all of these household things. And to step away from that, you have to start diverting what am I trying to say? Diverting your responsibilities. So just for an example, when I was babysitting my sister's kids, I'm like, wow, it takes 10 people, 20 people maybe to replace a mom. Everything that a mom does, you need 20 people to replace everything that a mom does. And I don't think that's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people for one person to get DBS. So I don't know if these are the thought processes that go through women's heads. I don't know. I can say that my doctor recommended DBS for me, or she said, look into it, because just putting my name forward is a year-long wait process for me to get the appointment to start thinking about DBS. And I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not ready for it yet. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still working through the pros and cons, but that's been my experience.
Well, I had something that popped up the other day in a casual conversation that it blew my mind is, with DBS, they put the battery pack in your chest. How do you get a mammogram with that? I was thinking, or how painful that must be with having to do that. And it's just, again, talking about how things are designed or developed. It's, this is another area where women are kind of the second thought. It's, number one, the positioning of it and being able to wear bras or swimsuits comfortably, our petiter sizes. But I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but it's just, that factors into it too, is just my physical comfort.
Just a quick note on that. If you get DBS, woman, and if you're going to get DBS, and when you get the battery pack installed, wear a bra after. Wear a bra after. I think several women have told me that helps decrease the pain.
Okay.
So definitely get support.
Well, the thing I have to comment on that is that, the batteries have gotten smaller, so they're like a quarter size, so they're not so bulky, and of course you would prefer having one battery for both sides as opposed to both sides having batteries. So there's options to talk like that. However, the one thing is that the duration of the battery really depends on the settings and how bad your Parkinson's is. So although it may say it may last up to 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, it may last only 3 years. So that means that you would have to go back to redo it every 3 years. So that is surgical procedure and in the same spot. And that's why I've had problems with patients telling me, that the site gets infected or becomes, wearing down, or, because the site just gets overused, kind of like you're having to cut the same side over and over. So, so that's one of the issues. And of course, infections. And again, every time, even though it's a quote unquote, outpatient procedure, a small procedure, it takes time to go to the doctor, to travel, to be off the medicines, to have somebody be with you, to monitor you, to reset it. And all of that takes time. And if you are alone, or you don't have somebody to accompany you, or you have other people to take care of, having to do this every so often, that becomes a big problem, So we'll never be able to get MRIs done. And you'll set alarms off at the airport. I already do ever since I have Parkinson's. I think I'm going to start wearing a little thing that says I have a magnet, just so that they keep passing me through. Because every time I go through through those machines, I set it off every time. So, so anyway.
All right, now we're going to get onto the big topic of hormones, fertility, pregnancy. We know little is known about the role of fluctuating hormones and how they affect our disease's development and severity. And we ask any woman with PD, we will all tell you there is some sort of connection, but there's a significant deficit of knowledge and research on how women cope with this throughout these hormonal life stages. There are even suggestions that estrogen can be neuroprotective, and this could be critical information for us. So, there's just so much to discuss on this. First, I guess, Sree, why don't we start with you, since you're the co-founder of the Women's Parkinson's Project, because they have been, and actually Maria too, you both have been instrumental in getting surveys out there, kind of a grassroots effort, so we can start collecting this information. So, Sree, why don't we start with your experience of how that was driven and collecting that information?
So most of the work, I think, was done by my co-founders, Kat Hale and Rochelle Flanagan. And Rochelle Flanagan was one of the authors in a paper called The Unmet Needs of Women with Parkinson's. The Unmet Needs of Women with Parkinson's Disease, something around that. I'm pretty sure that's the title. And
Yes,
the doctor, one of the doctors on it was Dr. Indu Subramanian.
Yes.
So that was a fantastic paper. It didn't have any solutions because we have unmet needs. So it basically outlined all the unmet needs, and there are so many. And so getting that information to scientists, to doctors, to researchers is really important. So Rochelle started this app, co-founded an app called My Moves Matter, where women can track their menstrual cycle and track their symptoms and the times they take their medication and the side effects as well, and see how that fluctuates and ebbs and flows with menstrual cycle. And there's currently a research study being done with the data combined, so she's looking for more women. So that's something that naturally kind of came as a result of what the Women's Parkinson's Project was doing. There's been stuff done by the Michael J. Fox Foundation as well. There's Brian Grant Foundation is doing a lot of webinars on women and Parkinson's disease, this being one of them. So basically, we need more data. We need more women to participate in studies. And the studies are not very invasive. None of these studies are particularly invasive. It's women telling the stories of what they go through on a daily basis with their bodies and their hormones. And until we can collect this data, which Maria knows, we're not going to really make any strides in treating women or making recommendations or prescribing things, whether they're like a prescription or non-prescription, whether it's holistic, organic, or medicine.
Maria, why are hormones a factor and what should we do about it?
Well, this is something that since I started this, my book came out in 2013. We started, when I became a patient, uh, I realized that my menstrual cycle started getting worse with the medications, and then my symptoms got worse. And I started to think about my own patients, and it dawned on me that we never really, in Parkinson's, again, because it was primarily an older men disease, we did not think about hormones or think about menstrual cycles or how that affected. And thinking about other female patients with other neurological diseases, we always took that into effect. We know that hormones are a big role in women medicine because one, you kind of have to talk about women's health pre, during, and post. So what are their cycles, what are their levels, and we know that estrogen is very, very important in inflammation. That the levels, during high estrogen, you have inflammatory protection, and you do have some neuroprotection. And so when they go down, we see increase in inflammation. And that's part of the reason why during the premenstrual cycle and menstrual, cycle, you have all that, fatigue and pain and so on, because the levels are low and now you have all that inflammation. And that's probably one of the reasons why women are more likely to have inflammatory immune diseases. You see more women having, diabetes, or rather thyroid disease, or lupus, and things that are autoimmune, inflammatory diseases, ulcerative colitis, things are because of the role that estrogen plays. So during the menstrual cycle, during those periods where it goes down, inflammation flare up tends to go higher, and you're going to have more symptoms. And we're seeing that kind of anecdotally throughout in the Parkinson's community. I saw it with myself, and I think I've told you that I had a hysterectomy, as I would with my migraine patients, as I would with my seizure patients, and my symptoms got better. So I think there is a correlation with that. But, we don't have all of this data. We had a small 304 patients do, women's survey from the PD generation. And we did see that there was increased inflammation, increased pain and depression in women, increased symptoms with the menstrual cycle, and also maybe a tendency to increase infertility. But again, that is something that, it was a small sample and it needs to be corroborated and more things need to be done. But we also know that it is neuroprotective, because we know that as soon as women become menopausal, there's an increased risk of stroke, an increased risk of heart disease. And so there's a window for that. Okay. And so we're seeing that. We're just kind of getting all this data and trying to figure out. We know women have a lot higher Alzheimer's. So all that inflammation is playing a role. So how does that play out with Parkinson's? Well, that's what we're still trying to figure out. We know that having an early hysterectomy with removal of their ovaries can increase the risk of Parkinson's. So we know definitely there is a correlation. But how do we prevent it? And how do we stop it? And, what do we do when you have the patients already? We don't have those answers. But what I can tell you, just as a physician, what you have to do in regards to your hormones is, when you come into your doctor, one, if you are around your menstrual cycle, and you think you may have Parkinson's, a lot of the symptoms that are premenopausal or perimenopausal, fatigue, concentration, pain, sleep disorders, increased urgency, increased frequency, all of those can be Parkinson's symptoms. So you have to make sure that you know what you're dealing with and get hormones tested and make sure that you do rule out thyroid disease, diabetes, and all the other things, and then consider, Parkinson's. But also on the same page, if you have Parkinson's and you start having more of those symptoms, one, treat it as the Parkinson's. And if it's not improving, then make sure that it's not, you're not going into menopause stage or, perimenopausal. But the problem is with the young women that are still, having cycles. One, we don't know what the fetal effect is with the medications. So if somebody's planning to have a baby, then we recommend. And the thing is that most women don't know they're pregnant until about 3 or 4 months, okay? Which means that the neural system is already formed. So if you really want to advise women, and in that stage, that I think you have to have a sincere conversation that how likely are you wanting to have children? How proactively are you trying to, so that you can really get the mom as well off, stable, okay, and not take any medications that may cause some fetal damage. Okay, and also remember that most of these medications also go through your breast milk. So if you want to breastfeed, then that's something else. Okay, so we want the mom, and also because it's an anti-inflammatory, because your hormones are dropping during pregnancy, you may have an exacerbation. So you need to talk about what to do. And certain medicines like melatonin and certain medicines for depression are not good during pregnancy. So you have to really talk to the doctor about those issues.
For the women that are experiencing these heightened symptoms during their menstrual cycle, should there be some hormone testing, and who should they speak to? Their MDS, their gynecologist? What would you recommend for getting them both on the same page?
Well, most in my experience, most MDS doctors are not going to deal with hormone issues. They're not going to deal with women issues. So you have to find either your primary care doctor or a gynecologist that is savvy enough and talk about, and have an interest of, perhaps other neurological diseases and, treats other neurological problems and Parkinson's, to try to treat that. And they have to have a rapport, but usually the Parkinson's physicians are not going to touch any hormones or make any decisions, or whether you're going to have a hysterectomy or whether you're going to have any of that. That's just been at least in this country, that's just been my general, experience.
I have a
Sree,
question. Maria, what do you say about endocrinologists? Could they be of service in this area or no?
Not typically. Again, they're really, you think they would, but they're not. They really leave it. Sometimes they may check the hormones, and often they do check the hormones, but may not really take into account your status with your Parkinson's, or if it's part of the Parkinson's syndrome, they're going to refer you back to to your MDS or your neurologist to manage that. But again, that's been my experience. I have an endocrinologist too, and it's like, yeah, the hormones, and the thyroid, I have thyroid cancer and things. So it's like, well, that's your neurologist problem. It's like, okay, but it's all related. So yeah. So we really need to have what I've discovered is that you need to be kind of the quarterback. You need to be in charge of everything so that you can manage and bring all that information back to your neurologist. Say, look, and that's what I do with my doctor. Say, okay, I had this issue with endocrinologist. I talked to this, gynecologist, and this is what's going on, and it's affecting my Parkinson's, and this is the plan. What do you think about that? And I'm going to do this or not do this, but you have to be in charge, because otherwise it's going to fall through the little slits, and even though they get the correspondence, they may not put it together or that it's related. So and you'll be the one suffering. So unfortunately, that's where advocating for oneself is important. And not all people, are savvy enough, or well versed in the medical, language to be able to manage all this. And that's why I recommend that you guys do get some of that medical knowledge, medical terminology by assisting these webinars, by going to the foundations, getting basic information, maybe consulting, there's some clinical navigators, that do Parkinson, so that you can get up to speed, at least have some basic knowledge. So when somebody says, you have this, you know what they're talking about, and you know what to do next, because that is the biggest, I think that's the biggest problem sometimes in the minority community, that they're not well versed. And so they tell them, you have this issue, you need to go see this doctor. And they're not really sure what steps to follow up to get there.
I have to say, I became so desperate. For me, my motor symptoms I could live with. It was the depression, the anxiety, the apathy that during my period, I was incapacitated. I couldn't function, and I was getting from my neurologist that's interesting. Don't have many patients of reproductive years, and that was it. There was no help, no solution, and I am, in my 30s with children trying to function, and I just started going off on my own, having to experiment. And it was actually my sister's IVF doctor who recommended looking at birth control options and getting back on it. And I remember I found recently a gynecologist whose mother has Parkinson's. I cried when I found her. I said, "You do not know how long I have searched for somebody who understands this." And as a result, I've been fortunate to work on this. But even then, my frustration is I made an appointment 6 months in advance to see specifically her. The day of the appointment, they booked me with somebody different. Oh, I was so angry. But yeah, it's hard. I have a whole, plate full of things I need to do, and to try to track down somebody who understands the nuances of Parkinson's and willing to work with me. But one thing before I met her, I was prepared, is I had printed out the research articles from Michael J. Fox Foundation, from the Women's Parkinson's Project. So I was prepared to go into the gynecologist and say, "Look, I'm not making this up because I needed help." And with that, I know we have so much more to talk about hormones, and I really want to go on more, but we've got more topics that are so important to get to. And one is care partners. As we've
Well,
mentioned.
Let me just say one thing about the hormones. This is an expanding field, in all neurology and all medicine, but neurology, this is all new. And so I don't want you to be frustrated, but in medicine, it's such a slow changing field. It takes years for it to become dogma. You listen to it, and this is what I was taught, and you're not going to change. So your role, and everybody's role, all of us talking, is to put that little seed out there. So to start thinking about these things, and eventually it will trickle down and it will make changes, but we have to keep at it. So I don't want you to be frustrated. It is frustrating, and you're not alone, but I want you to keep telling your doctors and telling everybody that hears that there is something that we need to be doing, so that eventually the teaching will change and the practice will change. So go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I go to research conferences or any type of Parkinson's conference, the one thing the panelists on those conferences mention multiple times over is that the person with Parkinson's disease is like the sun, and all the doctors and the specialists revolve around that person. However, that's not what it feels like. That might be what it should be, but that's not the reality. It kind of feels like I'm one of the planets or one of the moons, and Parkinson's is in the center, and then all the doctors and the therapists are roaming around, and we never meet each other. They never talk to each other. If you're part of an HMO and on the same system, like in California, if it's Kaiser or wherever else Kaiser is, that's helpful because the doctors can read each other's emails. And if you have a good primary care physician, that's what the primary care physician often does, is go through your emails to your doctors. If you're on another type of managed system, there is a system now where no matter what system you go to, if your hospital or your doctor, your provider is part of that, that's there. They can review those notes as well. I know more and more organizations, medical organizations, are joining that sort of I don't know what it's called, like I'm blanking on it, but that kind of shared database. But at the end of the day, it's really, as Maria said, the person with the Parkinson's disease who has to be the biologist, the scientist, the explorer, the nutritionist, and the event coordinator for your own life, for your own health, when you're actually going through executive functioning issues, fatigue, and all the other things. It's exhausting.
It is.
It is.
This is your self-care management is a full-time job, and to care for yourself and then to care for your family, and then you still have a job and frankly your personal interests. It is very hard and exhausting to manage all of it. We are coming up with 15 minutes left, and I have so many topics still to get to, but care partners. We've mentioned many times that women fall into the role of the primary care partner, and that studies are showing that men who have Parkinson's usually have the informal unpaid care because they have their, a female care partner caring for them, and women tend to have paid caregivers. And so how do we shift this? And Sree, I was also hoping, because as a single woman, what is your support system and where do you get your care from?
That's a really good question. My situation is also complicated by the fact that my father has Parkinson's disease. So he was diagnosed 8 years after I was, and my family, we all live together. So I see my mom, who is a woman, caretaking him. And I also step into that role, making sure he takes his medication on time, making sure he eats on time, that sort of thing. So for me, I'm essentially my own caregiver. I mean, my parents help out, like my mom cooks every day, or she'll ask me to cook on days when she's tired. So that's a real gift because she's an amazing cook. Fabulous. I eat well every day. But other than that, it's basically me managing all this stuff on my own. I mean, I have created a women's group. I co-founded the Women's Parkinson's Project. I've done all sorts of things to build my community out. And if needed, I'm just going to go and move to Portland, Oregon. I'm going to hang out with the Parkinson's community there, with the Brian Grant Foundation nearby. So that would be fantastic. But it actually is, I don't know. I don't know. And yeah. I just hope that I can take care of myself as the years go on. I don't expect to have a care partner take care of me. And I think even if that were to happen, that'd be a lot to ask somebody on the first go. And I prefer to, and I really don't like asking for help. That is very hard for me to ask for help. But because I am single and because I have this degenerative disease, I need to ask people for help. And I need to be open and honest with my friends. And luckily, I have a fantastic group of friends who steps in, who say they'll go on walks with me. They sometimes drop off food for me. And I'm not at any stage where I'm unable to take care of myself. It is getting a little bit harder, some things. But having that community of friends that cares is really important. Really important.
So, I think that's part of what I just asked about how do we shift this? And I think step one is we just have to get used to asking for help. I think, as women, we are, here we are talking about how you have to advocate for yourself, how you have to be that loud voice and, trudge ahead with this. And we get so stuck in that I think we also need to take a step back and we need to just start asking for help, because it's not going to come until we also raise that issue that we need more support. I don't want to spend too much more time on this. Maria, would you like to add anything about the care partners?
I won't say much, but I think that the Hispanics have it right, really having a multi-generational support system. Because I've discovered recently that, my health is, 17 years into Parkinson's. It gets really hard. And my support system, they're older and getting sicker too. So, the women that, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I could depend on and call on to be my drivers or to be my, health partners, they're now having issues of their own. So you see that circle getting smaller. And so that's what is really hard. And, I have a husband, but, he's got issues too. So then, you really, and I think about, when I get older and my disease gets worse, what's going to happen? And so that's something that we really have to publicly lobby for in Congress about getting more support for not only the patients but the caregivers to get paid services and unpaid services and resources, because at some point we're going to find ourselves stranded, alone, sicker, and not a whole lot of means to get. Even if you have money, you're not able to physically do things. So you need to have those support. So I would really encourage everybody to actively ask their congressman, join the Michael J. Fox Foundation and advocate, their public policy to do this, to have these changes. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing really quickly is, regardless of you having a care partner or not, that care partner, male, female, gender neutral, is probably going to be, I don't know this factually, but they're going to be like the same age, maybe roughly, that you are.
Exactly.
Unless you marry that person 20 years younger, or with that person is younger, and you missed out on your cougar lifestyle. It's very hard to have a care partner who's also the similar age, because they're going through stuff as well. So I see my mom and my dad together. I see other care partners together, but I'll just speak to my mom and dad because that's what I know, what I see in front of me. So my mom is in her 70s, my dad is 80. So she has to do all of that work to care for my dad. And he's still very functional on his own, but still, well, she's also going through osteoarthritis or leg pain and all of these things. So she gets tired. So if you're a couple and you're together, I think it'd be very difficult to rely on just your care partner as your sole source of support. Building that community around you, whether it's online, whether it's close by, whether it's in your neighborhood, is really vital, because it's a whole community that needs to come together to take care of a person with Parkinson's disease. And for some people, that's easy to cultivate. For some people, it's different, particularly if you live in more rural areas in the country or in the world. Where do you find these people? Which is why online is so great, but still, to have those resources available to families or to individuals who struggle with that is really important. And that's something that needs to be looked into as well.
Yeah. But you need real people close by. I mean, online is great, but they're not going to be able to drive you when you need it, or, help you with a meal or anything like that. So, yeah.
They could give you an Uber Eats gift card.
Well, that would be good, but
we're running short on time, so I want to briefly mention that I wanted to talk about financial considerations, because women with disabilities are twice as likely to be unemployed and underemployed as men. And I think this is a very important topic, but in the interest of time, I think maybe we'll have to take that to, maybe an online discussion, because I want to talk about the societal expectations. And before we started the live broadcast, we were all joking about how much we sweat and how long it takes us to, look presentable. I don't always wear makeup or do my hair, but I'll tell you, it personally makes me feel good when I look good, but the amount of work it takes to get into it. So I just kind of want to talk about some of the things that we do on a daily basis. I've had to redo my whole wardrobe because I can no longer stand tight clothes and hot, itchy things. And so let's just get into the nitty gritty of, being a woman and live in what we deal with on a daily basis. Sree, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I discovered a neat technique for being able to go to the bathroom, because sometimes as a woman, I don't know what it's like for men, but as a woman, you have to pee, and sometimes that urge just comes upon you really quickly. So you rush to the bathroom, which is not a good thing to do when you have Parkinson's disease. And then my arms tremor, and so I have to unbutton, unzip, pull up the shirt as well to unbutton and unzip, then sit down, then get up. There's nothing to hold on to. So what I discovered is wearing not crop tops, but tops that come just maybe 1 inch below the waistband of my jeans or pants really helps, because then I don't have to do that extra step of pulling up the shirt to unbutton and unzip. And that's been, those seconds that it saves me are really important seconds, very important seconds. So I will say that's a good tip.
I've converted to dresses with pockets. Any designers out there, put in functional pockets. But that's the same thing is I can just lift up the dress real fast and let it drop. Just make sure I didn't tuck the back into my underpants. Um,
Yeah.
but another thing too is my waist size changes so much throughout the day. I wake up in the morning looking good, but by the end I'm so bloated and full and my gut is slow that a waistband can get very uncomfortable by the end of the evening. So wearing like a nice loose dress is so much more comfortable. And then I'm constantly hot and dripping with sweat. And so I just feel like having that kind of extra breeze helps.
Yeah, the other thing I've done, and then I'll switch it over to Maria, is I stopped wearing a lot of makeup. Today I'm wearing some, but my eyelids were tremoring, my hand was trembling when I put on the eyeliner. That's happening a little bit more frequently. So I didn't wear a lot of makeup or do a lot of stuff before, but now I do even less. I'm like, this is my bare face, this is how it is. Or instead of wearing, and this is going to be maybe a little silly, but I love to wear liquid eyeliner, winged eyeliner, like 1950s. I've given that up for the most part. Now I just do a simple smudge and that's it. And I look in the mirror and it's not what I want to look like, but I'm getting used to it because that's what the reality is, you know? And I also have to be at my job. I have to attend conferences and work with clients and present because I work full time dealing with a public facing company. And it's a struggle sometimes to look good and not only look good, but to look happy and vibrant when my face is frozen, when my medication is not working, and not go into resting bitch face, which I think is perfectly fine for anybody to look like, but that's
Yeah.
certainly not going to welcome clients. So it's a lot of work to be that smiling, happy, pep person with a non-sweaty face and hair all in place, which I don't have to worry about, which is why I shaved off all my hair. So that makes it much
I love
easier.
No, I've converted to cream sticks for my eyeshadow because the same thing. It's just like it's easy. I can smudge it on. I'm not making a big mistake, and it's a little more sweat proof. Um, you've shaved your head, brilliant. Blow drying your hair. You do that without sweating because it's like I blow dry it, but it's not like I did anything because then I'm sweating it and it's wet again. Um, so I
Yeah.
have to start hours in advance to try. I mean, I shower at night now so that my hair is already dry in the morning. Put a little dry shampoo. Maria, do you have any little tips and tricks?
Well, first of all, um, if you're having a lot of sweating, a lot of the medications like amantadine can cause a lot of sweating in women, and also the levodopa compounds, the Stalevo, the ones that have the Comtan. So to know that, but a big part of the sweating issue is the medication wearing off. So it helps to be able to use longer compounds and add medicines like Ongentys, Comten, or another dopamine agonist so that you don't have that quick sudden drop. And that's what causes most of the sweating for the most part. Okay. But also, one thing that I've discovered that a lot of the sweating is also due to sudden changes in your blood pressure and sudden changes in your sugar levels when the medicines kick in and when the medicines wear off. So I started monitoring my blood pressure, my sugars, and my sweating has decreased incredibly. I used to be dripping all the time and, makeup running and hair wet all the time. And I always carry a fan with me, carry extra changing clothes, put some cooling pads, ice under your, behind your neck and in your, like your forearms and your wrists and things to cool off fast. Wear very light clothes, that helps. Also with increased urgency and frequency, the same thing. You need more dopamine. Usually that's what that means. And if you take more dopamine, you will decrease that. But another reason you have that is when women are very constipated, that's pressing on your bladder. So if you're not controlled with your bowels or you're not emptying correctly, then it's always going to have that pressure. And one is going to be more likely to get infections. And two, you're going to have that urgency and frequency. And of course, if you're older, you have decreased hormones, you're in the perimenopausal or menopausal, you're going to be more likely to have urine infections and more dryness. So important to take hormones so that it would decrease that urgency and frequency and you're not having to battle. But yes, I've changed my clothes. I wear a lot of stretchy pants now. A lot of spandex, lycra, soft, very soft, so that you can, even when you're stiff and shaky and dystonic, even though you get caught, you're not going to tumble, you're not going to fall, and you don't have to mess with buttons, you don't have to mess with zippers, you just pull on, pull off. And it's a lot easier. Sometimes if I'm going to be going far from home and you're not really sure, you've been having some issues with your bladder, although it's not very sexy, not very, attractive, but, wearing those undergarments for protection, just so that you feel like, you're not going to have an accident or you not have to rush somewhere or have to get, somewhere in time. So, it's last resort, kind of use something like that and have change of clothes all the time, but always, try to stay, cool clothes, fans, those handhelds. There's like a little handheld you can buy on Amazon. It has great power. I used to, when I went to Barcelona, it was like $2, and you can have all kinds of colors and the battery lasts like 8 hours. So you just, blow it on you, and it has like 3 or 4 different, speeds. So it's great. So something like that, and keep your hair up, if you don't want to shave your head, always, carrying out ponytails or, something to put my hair up if it starts getting sweaty and fan it. But yeah. And I too wear makeup that is more, no liquids, the base that is, more cream colors, so that, will stay on and it's not going to, drip. And the same thing with eyeliner. I won't wear eyeliners and eyelash makeup anymore much, unless I'm in a cool place, because you don't want that running in. And I don't like, I don't like waterproof mascara, but because I have sensitive eyes. But yeah, so I try not to wear, eye makeup very much anymore. But it is hard. It's a lot of work, especially 17 years into the disease, because you get apathetic, because the dopamine levels go down, and then you require a lot more. And then suddenly, you just don't feel like, looking great or doing your best. You're like, whatever, do I really have to dress? Do I really have to brush my hair? Do I really have to shower? But it's part of, it means you need more dopamine. So if you're in any of those stages, ladies, you need more dopamine.
I have to say, yeah, I mean, it's easy to just not care, give into that and not care anymore. But it's important to get that dopamine boost and feel good about yourself. I was going to say, funny video is me trying to put on false eyelashes. I tried it once. Man, it looked like I had caterpillars crawling over my face. It was hilarious. We're going to wrap up, but another quick tip, because there's so many tips I want to talk about, like zip up sports bras and stuff, but is my nose runs all the time too. And so I've gone to vintage hankies, because there have been so many times when I'm talking to somebody and my nose is running and I'm like, oh man, they must think I have a cold. And so I feel like with
That's
a vintage
side effect
hanky,
of the cinnamon. Yeah,
that I look a little classier. I'm taking care of that.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to end quickly with talking about, just a quick statement from each of you before I close this out is, how can women be the best advocate for themselves? So there's always these sensitive topics that we're afraid to talk about. I think, doctors call them the, the out the door questions or the butt questions. So if you are a strong woman, how do you still bring up those, sensitive, embarrassing comments you need to make? And how can you be the best advocate for yourself? Just a quick statement from each. Yeah, Sree.
For me, I'll say that I collect data. So I'll track what I'm doing, my bowel movements, when I pee, all that stuff. And then when I present it to the doctor, it's like data. I can separate myself from it. And then if they question what I'm saying or what I'm asking or don't believe me, I'm like, here's all the data I've collected. Take a look at this, and then you let me know. And so
that's great.
That's how I do that.
Thank you.
That's a good way.
Maria?
It really depends on how you bring it up. It depends on the kind of rapport you have with your physician. But I would think that you would bring the sensitive topics to the person that you are closest to and have that rapport. And so whether it's your neurologist or whether it's your gynecologist or whatever, if it's female issues, then to bring that up. But it is important that doctors sometimes, again, we get focused on the things are going to kill us, the falls, aspiration, and so we don't really ask, did you sleep well? Did you sweat? Did you have trouble, putting on your clothes? How many times did you go pee? So we have to make a note and bring it up that, hey, I spend more time in the bathroom than I do, when I have to travel, that I have to do this, or that, I can't, I have to change like I was doing, 10 times a day because I'm dripped in sweat, and I have to shower 20 times a day, and have, all kinds of deodorants and body wipes and those body sprays and things like that, because you don't want to offend anybody and you offend yourself, so bring those things up that are very important, for a person, just, a person, whether you have a disease or not, when people are homeless, I mean, that's the best thing you can do, like give them a shower, clean clothes, make them feel good, so if you're all sweating and stinking because you're diseased, and then I don't know about you ladies, but ever since I've been on Parkinson's, all these medicines, all the medicine smell just seems to come out. It's like, where's that smell of medicine come out from, And so you want to, talk to the doctors about these things and make sure they understand and they listen, and don't leave without getting some kind of answer, like, what can I do? What can I change? Who do I see? What do I do? Because that is your livelihood. It is the small things that really matter in living with this disease. Like, initially I couldn't do my nails anymore. I couldn't put on my earrings, things that make you a woman, things that make you want to be who you are. And if you can't do that anymore, then it's kind of like, it's not really worth sometimes, to go through all that hassle. So that's my advice. Talk to somebody who listens, and always try to get solutions for your problems. So
Thank you so much. And I just, and also I want to say, sharing in our online support communities. And I was just, watching the chat, and people are sharing their tips and tricks. And that's how, this grassroots movement gets going, and how we learn these little, life hacks to make living with this disease a little more tolerable. Parkinson's is the fastest growing and second largest neurological condition worldwide. So we need equality in research, care, and support. We need to unite our voices to demand change in our medical care and make sure that you are heard when it comes to your symptoms. And if they aren't listening, find someone who will. Participate in research, do those surveys. And to our caregivers and families that are joining us, please educate yourselves on how you can support the female in your lives. Everybody, Maria, Sree, thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody out there, thank you for joining us and for all of your information, and continue to support each other, and just let's raise each other up and make our voices heard. I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.
thank you, everybody. God bless.